maybe Kumbin, you could do the umse for just refuge and bodhicitta, right? But before that, I just want to say a few words to set the motivation. So to make sure we have the right kind of motivation for this review class, let's take a moment to think, may this get together, may this become a cause for all of us to do what Rinpoche taught us to do, to transform our mind in order to reduce our own problems, our own difficulties, and of course our own misapprehensions of reality, including all other afflictive emotions, anger, and so forth. Not just for our own benefit, but for the welfare of all sentient beings. And may it even become a cause for us to gain the insights of an enlightened Buddha. Okay, and so with this attitude, let's take refuge and generate bodhicitta once again through the prayer. Yes, Kumbin?
Shall we do in English, Geshe?
Sure.
I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings.
Okay, thank you. Great. All right. Now for today, last time I went through literally everything Rinpoche said, but there's no need to do this now. Last time I had a sense I didn't say anything, so I wanted to make sure, when I translated, I had a sense I didn't say anything. And then in the review class, just basically repeated everything that Rinpoche had said. But now that is not necessary. I got more used to the volume, the speed, and everything. It was easier this time, last time, that is yesterday. And I'm just totally amazed again at what Rinpoche said. And I really just want to give you an overall view and some additional explanations, things that came to mind. Things that I feel Rinpoche implied with this and so forth. And then, of course, we have time for questions. So I won't talk as long as last time. It was more than an hour. Today, it's just going to be an hour, and then there's time for questions. So Rinpoche, again, gave some introduction, and so important, this introduction, reminding us why we're doing what we're doing. In the sense that, we have a tendency, I think humans in general, but in particular at this day and age, that for us, listening to a lesson or studying something, studying the Dharma, in that case, there's a sense of just accumulating knowledge, which of course there's that aspect. We try to get a better understanding of what the Buddha said, understand better, especially difficult concepts such as emptiness, like what is the Buddha talking about? Trying to hear something that we haven't heard before to help us understand. There is that aspect. However, if that's all there is, we get easily bored, because having heard it over and over again, we listen with the kind of mind that's just waiting for a new way of putting it forth, with using new vocabulary possibly, or different words, giving different examples. And it just remains very superficial. And with this superficial study of the Dharma, it's too superficial to go to a deeper level. And as part of the question and answer Rinpoche gave yesterday, what is going to be carried over to the next life? It wasn't deep enough. It hasn't become a deep enough kind of imprint in our mind, or tendency in our mind, that is carried over to the next life. So we'll just forget and basically start from the beginning. Therefore, it's so important to use the Dharma for one purpose and one purpose only, to transform our mind. Different examples were given. For instance, well, the Dharma should be like a spear, like a weapon, like a spear with a pointed top that hits you in the heart, but hits you in the heart as in like hits your mind in those places where it matters, so that self-grasping, it hits you in the sense of understanding, wow, my self-grasping, my self-centeredness is such a problem. I really need to make some changes. Or to give another example, the Dharma becomes like a mirror and our mind is like the face. Okay, so really the Dharma is meant to mirror our face, to mirror our mind, to mirror our mind, in that just to like a face, you have blemishes, you've got, I don't know, some spots, some freckles and so forth on your face. Well, the mirror allows you to see that. In the similar way, the mirror allows you, the mirror of the Dharma allows you to see your own mind. So what am I doing? How am I acting? What is important for me to do? What kind of negativities are more pronounced in my case? What affliction is something that's giving me a hard time, and so forth. So in a way, to be more self-observant and use the Dharma as a measuring scale, if you like, and see, does that apply to me or not? So there's this particular way of listening, first of all, to any kind of teachings, and of course later on to reflect on whatever you've heard. And that way you have these three stages: listening first, then reflecting on what you've heard, and of course then bringing it into your own life, internalizing it, becoming familiar with it, which is another way of saying meditating, meditation. Now listening, and I've said this on many occasions, but for those who haven't heard me say that, when you listen to a teaching, like a teaching from a high Lama, I'm talking about in particular from someone like His Holiness, so important. So there's some people, His Holiness gives teachings that are really incredible. I mean, some scholars, some, lamas, they would say His Holiness's teachings are so amazing because a person who's a total beginner has a sense they've understood everything, while a person who's extremely advanced has a sense, wow, this was totally new. This was so amazing and so helpful. So all parties really benefit from it. This is so unusual. But it's so important to listen with the right kind of attitude, because if you're a beginner, oh yeah, there's a lot of new stuff there. If you've already heard something similar and you're just looking for information, well, it's going to be like, oh yeah, great, new, well, no, sorry, frustration, like, oh, His Holiness said that before, I heard that before, I read that before, I don't get anything out of it. And so therefore, those who are really advanced, like an advanced practitioner, for instance, they listened with His Holiness to His Holiness teachings in the way that they use His Holiness's words as a mirror to their own mind. Sometimes people say they listen with their heart, but really I like the analogy of like, use the Dharma, whatever His Holiness says, and check, is this true in my case? Am I doing this? Am I not doing this? So right away, bring it to your own mind. And then if you listen, so you listen to it from the point of view of your own experience. It's not just information, it's right now where your mind is at this point in time. And when you do that, the teachings are over, you can't let go of it. It keeps you occupied, because His Holiness has hit you in a place where you usually not really hit, or seldomly hit, because that's the power of His Holiness's words. And then you keep thinking about it, and there's an automatic process that starts. You can't let it go. That was so amazing. And you're actually able to internalize it, which means you transform your mind. And that is the whole purpose, to change our mind, to listen to something and to then apply it. And well, there are times when whatever you've applied today is lost tomorrow. But of course, to be aware, it just needs a little bit more We're controlled, of course, by certain afflictive emotions. Now we have to learn to be more controlled by that which we learn. And it just takes time and effort. But eventually you look back and you definitely notice the change. Therefore, very important to listen to the Dharma, and in such a way that you take the Dharma as a mirror as you hear what Rinpoche says. In particular, someone has realized, as Rinpoche, for instance, again, very, very realized master. It's a little bit more in the bag because of the nature of his job, but whoever knows him is in awe of Rinpoche, of his incredible qualities, his knowledge, of course, too, but in particular, his subdued mind and so forth. Anyway, so he stressed this. He said, we should be aware. This is how we use the Dharma. Why? Well, because the Dharma essentially talks about something so important, which is selflessness, which is the whole text is about selflessness. So now if you're interested in emptiness, you get more of it. Rinpoche only just started. He did just the first 4 verses. But anyway, what is also so important, emptiness or selflessness, the essence of that this is not done without a purpose. It's not like, wow, it's great. Well, for some people it's fun. It's like a hobby. Listen to teachings on emptiness and try to figure it out. It's almost like a what do you call it? A crossword, like a mind game. And it's fun to, go deeper and so forth. That's fine if you use emptiness that way. I mean, there's no harm to do it that way, to use it that way. But of course, the main purpose is, well, to affect our lives, to get rid of something that is totally unnecessary and that drains all our energy, which is suffering, which are the unpleasant experiences we have over and over. Well, they're unnecessary in the sense, well, they're not in the nature of our mind. They're not supposed to be there, really. And yeah, well, some suffering experiences, they can help us, of course, in the short term. They can help us to grow stronger and so forth. But wouldn't it be great to totally get rid of any type of suffering, any type of problem, and instead have all the energy and all the strength of our mind that our mind potentially has to, well, be effective, especially for the beings around us. So not just for ourselves. We would have already come to a point where our mind, it's got so much strength and so much power that all this suffering and so forth wouldn't lead us into depression and anxiety and so forth. But we would then be totally effective to work for the welfare of others. So wouldn't that be great? But first we need to recognize our situation, and therefore Rinpoche gave this amazing teaching on suffering, which, well, we don't really like. It's like listening to bad news all the time. I don't want to hear this all the time. It's, for some people, it seems pretty pessimistic hearing about suffering. For others, it's like, well, not only is it depressing, to me, it doesn't seem true, right? Like, I guess since life is not all about suffering, the way Rinpoche put it, it was really intense, but it was so to the point and undeniable, really. But remember last time Rinpoche gave a quote from the Pramanapatika where he talked about, and I did translate it actually, and I still haven't made it available, but this verse where it says, when there's craving obstructs all the faults. From seeing positive qualities, there's complete craving. What does that mean? It means that we're attached to our existence. We have a very attached mind, and we are able to be attached to suffering. I mean, we're attached to suffering, we're attached to problems, we're attached to anything. It's our mind's function. It's almost like how it happens, we're attached to something. So sometimes, of course, we're attached to being away from a problem. That also happens, but oftentimes we also identify with a problem. And since we're so attached, we have a tendency to think, oh, life is all right. It's not that bad. I do have happiness. Right after a month of hard work, if I get my paycheck, there's a moment of happiness. That's all right. From Buddhist point of view, it's like, what? You worked so hard. It was so much effort, and all you get is that short moment of getting a paycheck. And that's it. It doesn't last very long. And then you have to work really, really hard to have it again. So the way Rinpoche expressed it, like I said, it was so, I thought, extremely potent, because he said, well, there's this way to think about the three types of suffering. Suffering of suffering. Okay, so we're all aware there are a lot of problems around us. Okay, so sometimes we don't like to hear it because it's so depressing. But instead of allowing ourselves to be depressed, it should become a cause for us to be determined to do something, especially when it comes to compassion, to use it to be determined. I need to do something. There's so much suffering around me. Look at all these people who are suffering, who have so many unpleasant experiences, to use it that way. That is really effective. But that is called the suffering of suffering. That's the obvious type of suffering. And although everyone is aware of it, everyone knows it's suffering, even animals know that unpleasant experiences is something they don't want. For us humans to spend some time and look around what's going on around us, what are other people experiencing, what is their plight, and so forth, to get a sense, I can't just sit still and enjoy my life. I need to do something. There's so much around me. I've got responsibility. I have more opportunities than the people who are suffering. So I need to do something. It can really get us to generate stronger compassion and a sense of urgency. But that's only the first type. The next type, which you described, was, well, and the purpose of the whole of describing these three types of sufferings, or describing suffering in general, is to say that actually all our experiences are in the nature of suffering. A woman nature. So there's something terribly wrong with our situation right now. Now, starting off with what we usually call suffering, okay, that's skillful, it's obvious, we don't have a trouble with that. But then the next type of suffering, that's a little harder, because it's the pleasant feeling I get from receiving my paycheck, as the example I used before. That moment of, ooh. Or after a long day's job, sitting down, I don't know, in front of the television with a bottle of beer, possibly, or, sitting around with friends, and that sense of pleasure. It's like, oh, I love this so much. I have to give it up. I can't give that up. What else do I have in my life? It seems like my life would just be empty if I didn't have that little bit of happiness. I mean, it never lasts very long, but when you're in love, for instance, maybe for a month, there's this, whoa, oh my God, life is wonderful, beautiful. Of course, it doesn't last, but it's there. And there's a sense when you hear about it's suffering, it's like they want to take that away from me. That's all I have. Don't take away my limited happiness. I can live with it being limited. But it's what the Buddha did, what Rinpoche did, what many teachers do. They're just telling us, well, yeah, enjoy it for what it is, but really understand it for what it is. There's so much more. Your mind can experience so much greater. I mean, this is a type of happiness that is really just the absence of a worse problem. It's just the absence of something worse. So you feel a kind of relief from a worse situation. Like, let's say when you eat something, well, the first bite, it's like, oh, it's bliss. Why? Because it's the relief of the hunger you had before. The stronger the suffering of hunger before, well, the stronger the sense of, wow, how amazing, right? And that's what we hold on to right away. That kind of, oh, I want more of that kind of happiness. So we keep eating and more. And of course, before long, we're so full and we suffer. Now, the point is here, therefore, understanding that what we call happiness is really just a temporary absence of something worse, which is why you, on an ordinary day, it rains. It's just an ordinary, well, summer day right now in Germany, it rains. And so ordinarily, I'd be like miserable. But if yesterday I was really, really sick, if I had been, I wasn't, but if I had been extremely sick, I had a belly ache and so forth, and now today I feel better, I'd be so happy. It's raining, the clouds are covering the sky, I can get up, I can move around, I'm healthy. So the same situation, but now because of the relief from something worse. Yesterday, well, I was given in that case the disease, and today I feel so good. Nothing has changed in terms of the weather is still the same, but the change is really a worse suffering is gone. So that is why I'm happy. All right. Now our life really, our happy experiences are really just these absences of something worse. And that's what I call happiness. Now, the reason for, and this was Rinpoche's most potent explanation, is that the reason for that is that we have this mind and body, have this body. We have a very limited body. Its causes, of course, are found in the misapprehension of reality. We just talked about it before in our a week earlier on. He talked about the reason we are in cyclic existence with this mind and body. It's because of, well, karma having thrown us into this existence. And that is the result of other afflictive emotions, which can be traced back to self-cherishing or self-centeredness, which in turn is rooted in the basic misapprehension of reality, which is why this is what we're aiming at. This is what Buddhism is all about, understanding that basic misapprehension. But before he went into this, starting with the text or continue with the text, what Rinpoche said was, well, this mind and body is in the nature of suffering. How do we know? Because we don't have to do anything to suffer. We can just lay back and suffering will arise sooner or later in whichever form. So something undesirable is going to happen. If you stay the same spot for too long, you'll be achy, you get bored, you get hungry, you get thirsty, you start to smell. People will, well, possibly gossip about you. Look at this person that's just lying around, not doing anything. I mean, the point is something, it's not going to be pleasure that you will experience. So for any type of relief, so without calling it even pleasure, like really strictly speaking, from the point of view of the nirvanic happiness that you can experience, the kind of happiness someone experiences when their mind is liberated from self-grasping, from that point of view, our happiness is just a short relief. It's just that relief, like I just said, from something worse. So to get a relief from that, we have to really make an effort, which again, it's not easy. Right? If you're just comfortable and you don't want to get up and then you feel hungry, well, then you can no longer enjoy it. So you have to make an effort and go out and buy food and prepare the food. So in other words, if we don't do anything, we'll suffer. And in order to gain some relief of that suffering, hunger, thirst, etc., we need to work really hard. We have to make an effort. And sometimes we work too hard, because we're attached to certain outcomes that are not even necessary to keep us alive. I mean, if you need 10 cars, you feel like you need 10 cars and 5 houses, well, you may have to work so much harder. And that's all you do in the end, just work and work. And then one day you die and, well, great, you've got these 5 houses and what have you. And, well, the government gets them or whatever. So the point is, therefore, Rinpoche is saying with this last type of suffering, pervasive suffering. So the first one, suffering of change, that's kind of easing us into our situation. But with the last one, it's saying, well, of course, the first 2 types of sufferings are the case. So of course, you have the suffering and the suffering of change. Well, you have the suffering of, you have those 2 types of suffering because there's this third type, which is the basis. It's the pervasive type of suffering. It's just the existence of mind and body we have right now. And unless you make an effort, it'll just naturally suffer. Okay, so he talked about impure substances coming from the body. Okay, Rinpoche said, okay, impure, of course, it's relative. You may use these impure substances and fertilize your fields with it. It can be useful. We're not saying it's not useful, of course, but what we're saying is it makes you feel comfortable. You could get sick and so forth. So in a sense, it's impure from that point of view. With regard to the second type, the suffering of change, what I forgot to mention, of course, is that it's called suffering of change because whatever pleasant experience we have, if that which triggered this pleasant experience is not changed, it'll inevitably change into suffering. So if you just, whatever gives us that happiness, of course, if it's like watching a movie gives us happiness after a long day, well, if we continue to watch a movie, if we don't change into maybe taking a walk and so forth, that experience will inevitably turn into suffering. So we have to, again, move around and make an effort to do something else, because otherwise we get bored or whatever else happens that causes us to suffer. So that's why it's the suffering of change. And of course, because our existence is in the nature of suffering, in that right now, as long as we have self-grasping, we cannot really be truly happy. That's really what he said. So as long as we have this misapprehension, as long as we hold on to a fake I, not talking about the I that does exist, we're not grasping onto that. We're not even aware of the actually existent I. We are holding onto an exaggerated version of that which really exists. We totally exaggerate its existence, have this projection of an I, and from there self-grasping and everything else. And we cannot, with this mind, that even if it's not active, even if it lies latent, we cannot truly be happy. Let's face it. All our experiences will be colored. So you can be as wealthy as you are, you can have as many friends as you can find. It's not going to take care of it. There may be a short relief, but that's all it is. It's not going to be lasting happiness. So really, and that's what Rinpoche pointed at. He's saying, we need selflessness. You may think it's difficult. Well, yes, it is. It's not easy, but can't get around it. You want to really make a change? Well, look at selflessness. And that's when he started the text. Okay, so I thought it was a potent, beautiful introduction to be ready to, I don't want these experiences. I don't want these limited experiences. I want to get out of it, out of this. And so, well, there's no instantaneous, of course, way to get out of it, but there is definitely a possibility. Now, what Rinpoche did was, well, he did last time explain the first verse in true Tibetan manner, started slowly. Okay, this is a very Tibetan traditional way to start a text. First, give a lot of background information. This time, Rinpoche didn't give that much. He said, no, the longer introduction he's given before, but he's just said a few words. Basically, kind of, he seemed to imply in the beginning, I don't need an introduction, but then he did give some introduction. But it was much shorter. And last time he only explained one verse. This time it was already 3 more. And the speed will, he will pick up the pace of his teaching, as Tibetans do, to kind of ease you slowly into the text. And even this time, Rinpoche added a few things to what he hadn't said before. This is a very, these 3 points, he gave these 3 causes for an author to compose a text. He hadn't mentioned them the last time Rinpoche gave a teaching, but he did this time. And he said, well, actually it is customary to look at the author. Yeah, you actually start with the biography. Rinpoche didn't start with the biography. He mentioned it a little bit later. So there's this biography. You may want to read it. You can actually Google it, but just make sure you spelled Changkya Rölpai Dorjé in the right way, because otherwise you're going to look forever. So if you just type in Changkya and Dorjé, you'll be okay. You'll find it. The Rölpai is written in so many different ways that it's difficult to find his biography. So you can read about Changkya. So that's already helpful. And Rinpoche talked a little bit about, saying that he was politically quite involved. That's quite interesting. Very interesting about his political, in that he was very close to the Chinese emperor at the time. However, at the same time, being actually, I think he was born in Mongolia. But the point being that he traveled to Tibet, and he met with the 7th Dalai Lama and became a close student of the 7th Dalai Lama. He also composed a kind of a dictionary, which words to use when translating, what are the right terms when translating the words of the Buddha into Tibetan, what is the right term and so forth. So he did all that, and he composed a great text on the the tenet systems. Very it's a short text, not very long, but used in the monastic institutions. But he was really a realized master. He was a highly realized master, and he wrote this piece which is actually quite rare and difficult to understand. Because when you read it first, it's like mother, brother, what is this talking about? So without an explanation, it's quite difficult. Anyway, and at the beginning, if you know a little bit about the author, so usually you traditionally you would know something about the author that gets you interested, okay? Because you don't want to just listen to anyone's teaching. You want to listen to a teaching by someone who you trust to some degree, who inspires you. So all these emotions should also be part of listening to a teaching that is following a certain text. Having already, well, if you listen to His Holiness, a lot of people have already faith in His Holiness. There's a sense of joy being in the presence of His Holiness. And whatever His Holiness says, on top of the attitude that I previously mentioned, it affects us in a totally different way. There's this joy, and the joyful mind is very, very helpful for Dharma practice. I mean, if you take it to the tantric level, it's even the blissful mind that you use. But just this joyful mind, joy, a deep joy being in the presence of an inspiring person, that puts your mind at rest, and it opens your mind in a way in which other states of mind don't open you up. So this kind of joy is important. It doesn't last. It's still in the nature of suffering, but we're using a pleasant experience here for the Dharma. And this is something Rinpoche also talked about. Still, our body's in the nature of suffering, but we still use it for the Dharma. We use it like a ship. That was really funny. He said sheep. I'm sure he said sheep. So for a second, it was like, Rinpoche's talking about sheep. But then I went back to the recording and I found, oh, he's talking about ship. So like, and he later said it in Tibetan. It's like a boat. Our body is like a boat. It's like a something you use to go from here to there. So it is helpful. Let's not ignore that. But the point is that we don't just want to live our life in a meaningless way and try to just preserve this body to the best way we can and not use it to change our mind, to transform our mind. And likewise, here with regard to this joy, of course we can experience joy and pleasant experiences, but let's not generate joy that just comes from having 5 cars and what have you, but the joy of being around a person who inspires us. So joy is really important. Like I said, it comes up again and again. At the end of the Heart Sutra, everyone was joyful after the Buddha said those words of appraisal and so forth. You remember? So therefore, inspiration is extremely important for that feeling of joy, or like an inner, it's hard to describe it, an inner feeling of peace being around a special person. And when you listen to His Holiness the Dalai Lama and you have already a connection, it happens naturally. But here, Changkya Rölpai Dorjé can hardly even write his name. So who is this person? You want to find out a little more to be inspired to read this. Okay, so that's why there's a lot of time spent initially on making that connection. Well, hearing about the history or the biography of this person really helps. It's usually given at the beginning. And secondly, what Rinpoche also mentioned, and the biography is too long, we don't have enough time actually to go into it, but Rinpoche said, well, if you have the time to read on your own, that's helpful. So the point is, here there are these 3 aspects an author should have that already gives you a good sense that this person is qualified to compose this text, which means they're a highly realized being and really someone we can learn from. So the first quality is that they have received instructions from a master whose teachings can be traced back to the Buddha, in that there's an unbroken lineage of teachings. Of course, it's really difficult to know, was it really unbroken or not? But in the end, well, we can be pretty certain masters, they received teachings from other masters, from again other masters. And if you went back, like you trace your ancestors, well, you could actually literally or really trace back these teachings to the Buddha. passed on from one realized master, the Buddha himself, to his disciples, realized masters, all the way through to the Lama of someone like Changkya Rölpai Dorjé, because of course Changkya Rölpai Dorjé, being an amazing being, he has amazing lamas, like the 7th Dalai Lama, Kelsang Gyatso. So that's the first quality. That becomes clear from his first verse. So if you read the first verse, oh my guru, your kindness is boundless, and so forth. Just this shows he had a qualified teacher, and this qualified teacher, his teachings definitely can be traced back to the Buddha. That's the first kind of quality a teacher should have. The second is a little problematic. The second is the teacher should have permission from a meditational deity to compose this text. That's like meditation deity. Are we talking about Tantra here, first of all? And what kind of permit would that be? Like, how are you going to give me a permit? Like, well, it's really not meant in that literal sense. Again, here, meditational deity in the sense of being inseparable from one's own master. So having a qualified master, qualified teacher who's supportive of the actions of the author. And again, Rinpoche said, well, asking this teacher to reside in one's own heart, putting the Lama close, means that, well, this closeness only comes from doing what the Lama wishes. And in that way, one acts according to the wishes of one's Lama, who manifests in the form of a meditative deity. And in that way, you could say, well, that permission was given. And then thirdly, well, the master has knowledge of what is taught here, and you will find out once you read the text at the end of the text, well, does it make sense? Is it tenable? Is it feasible, what he says, and so forth. And of course, here in verse 2, and this is how Rinpoche came to read verse 2, well, he said this lunatic child who lost his mother long ago, so that means himself, he's about to realize what he has not recognized. Okay, so he's about to realize, which is just a modest way of saying he's already understood it. Or if you take it literally, it means that, well, at least he's close enough, which I certainly can't say of myself. Close enough to understanding my mother? No way. Because what is my mother? It's emptiness. Emptiness here, so mother is described, well, another word, and you're aware of that, of course, if you were there yesterday. Of course, mother refers to emptiness. Emptiness in general, or, well, more specifically, emptiness of the mind. Because here, the child is Changkya Rölpai Dorjé's own mind. His own mind seeking for his mother, if you like. So there's this interesting way of using analogies. So the seeking child is like, well, the mind is like the child. So for us, we're practitioners. If we're practitioners, and Changkya Rölpai Dorjé including himself in practitioners, so he may be highly advanced and be already enlightened, who knows. Definitely, John Mipham apparently said that the Gelugpa tradition, he's asserted to be he has reached some of the bhumis. So it's not clear which bhumi from what he says, but the point is that he's highly advanced, but he's kind of putting himself on our level, saying, well, I haven't really realized it yet, but I'm about to realize it. So as I said, maybe a way of showing humility or putting himself on our level, but it's to be assumed that he has realized emptiness. Okay, so, but he still calls himself a child. So in the way we are as practitioners, we're like children. Our minds are like children's mind, in that we're so immature compared, of course, to a highly realized master, compared to the Buddha. So like a child seeking the one thing that is so important. So why is emptiness so important? Well, as I said, if self-grasping, if the mind that perceives phenomena, including the eye and other phenomena, to exist in a way that is totally unrealistic, that perceives phenomena to exist in and of themselves, inherently, independently, well, then the opposite of that selflessness, is emptiness. And that's why I need to understand. That's the only way. Understanding the opposite of what self-grasping perceives. That's the only way to get rid of everything that self-grasping gives rise to. Okay? Gives rise to self-centeredness, gives rise to all the other afflictive emotions. So I want to get rid of them. I need to get rid of self-grasping. And to do that, I need to understand that the object of self-grasping is totally unrealistic. And again, not just intellectually, but from deep within. Really experience that. That's the only way. And so our mind right now is like this seeking child. Why is it lunatic? Why is this child lunatic? Well, we're like pretty lunatic. We're pretty crazy, in that we're under the control of afflictive emotions and karma. And also lunatic in the sense that our mother, this emptiness of our mind, emptiness of all other phenomena, has been with us the whole time, and we didn't realize it. We didn't realize everything has been empty since beginning this time, and since beginning this time, we've been holding onto the opposite. What a waste, right? If you think about it, again, from that misapprehension, all suffering arises. We totally unnecessarily suffered because all that suffering came from a basic misapprehension, not knowing our mother, emptiness, was actually with us the whole time. Now, of course, mother, emptiness, why not father, emptiness? And the explanation was given. So we talk about wisdom, emptiness, the wisdom realizing emptiness. We don't separate those when we talk about the mother. So it's like the wisdom is said to be female. Rinpoche gave an explanation that was really clear, why it's female, why it's seen as the mother. Of course, you may remember if father and mother come together, the father determines what kind of practitioner, whether a Mahayana practitioner or a Hinayana practitioner. That's determined by the father, which refers to method, like whether you're bodhicitta or the aspiration to be self-liberated. Whereas while wisdom is the same, wisdom, the mother, is the same. And all of them grow, they rise from wisdom, the wisdom of emptiness. So Buddhas arise, they are born from, if you like, the mother that is wisdom. And other great beings, such as the great arhats, the self-liberated beings, whether heroes or solitary realizers, they're all born from the mother that is wisdom. So in that way, this analogy using the mother, describing the mother to be, wisdom, or in this case, emptiness, makes perfect sense. And even the sutras that describe emptiness explicitly, including the Heart Sutra, so you have the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra, a whole genre of literature in the Tibetan canon, or in the Buddhist canon, I mean, the Buddhist teachings, which are described as the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, and they're also called the Mother Sutras. Well, it's obvious, therefore, we talk about emptiness, the object of that wisdom, also as mother. We're lunatic. We've had our mother the whole time with us. So here it says lost. Torwa, as in like, almost like neglect. We've neglected, we've lost. Rinpoche used this term. It's very difficult to translate it into English. It's kind of like we made ourselves lose our mother, which kind of seems to imply we had her once and then we lost her. That's not meant with this. It's more like we're responsible for not finding her. That is, we neglected emptiness. We just weren't interested, and well, we never came across those teachings, or even if we did, we never took it far enough to actually try to understand how phenomena really exist. So this is basically what this verse, this here. So this lunatic child, me, we lost our old mother. Why old mother? Well, it's been with us since beginning this time. And we're just a child because we're so immature. Is about to realize by chance. Then Rinpoche gave this really long explanation of this by chance, which is not easy. And I had a hard time translating it because I'm not used to translate grammatical terms. And what Rinpoche said, just for those who don't know, well, for those who do know Tibetan, it was pretty easy. I mean, it was straightforward, Rinpoche said, but there's this expression in Tibetan that is Chishitar Nangde. So I'm just saying it because I have to use something which translates really, Rinpoche says, into suddenly or by chance, unexpectedly. And he just said, well, this term is misunderstood because as part of this term, you have one letter that's de at the very end, de. And this word de in Tibetan grammar can be like a particle of continuation. So when you have the word de, then you know something else is going to follow. You expect some explanation now. So sometimes it's a reason that's given, sometimes a clarification. But whenever you see this de, like this particle of continuation, you know something is going to come. And Rinpoche said, well, some people think this de in here is this particle of continuation, but it isn't. It isn't at all. In actuality, it's part of this whole term that means by chance. Okay, so if you want to know about Tibetan, Rinpoche gave the example of Bodhisattva's way of life. If you look at the 3rd chapter, verse 28, first verse in 28, it says, for I'm like a blind man who's just found a precious gem inside a heap of dust. So he's saying, having found bodhicitta, I'm like a blind person who's found a precious gem inside a heap of dust. For so it is by some strange chance that bodhicitta has been born in me, by some chance. Same word, chishitarnan, chishitarde in Tibetan, chishitarde. Anyway. Gave that long explanation, and yeah, you probably noticed I had a hard time finding a word for particle of continuation and so forth, so I didn't even translate it, at least not properly. But the point being, here he's saying that by chance, so unexpectedly. It's not really like by chance, literally in the sense that, well, there were no causes and conditions that gave rise to it, but it's almost like, and I guess that reflects that a little bit, when certain beings, they have certain insights. It's not like they know exactly when these insights are going to come, but when all the causes and conditions are right, we often don't know that, and then they just arise. So we have sometimes just small insights into things that suddenly there's the thought, that's probably what my teacher always talks about, or this is what his holiness has said. We may have these brief moments. I mean, I don't know, you may have greater realizations. In my case, like short moments of just going, that's probably what's meant. And they also often arise unexpectedly. Like suddenly there's this, maybe that's what they've been talking about, and I never got it. So I guess this is what's reflected in here too. About to realize by chance what the child has not recognized. She has been with him all along. Our mother has been with us all along. Now, of course, I have this commentary here in English by Jeffrey Hopkins. It's still a draft. We still didn't receive permission to use it. But actually, before I was aware there was this translation, I found out Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and just to give you the background, but Lama Zopa Rinpoche had I think Lama Zopa Rinpoche was him himself requesting His Holiness's office to give a teaching on this text, recognizing my mother. And so, so kindly, His Holiness agreed, and these beautiful teachings were now, made available to the different translators. So we all received the Tibetan text of it, the English translation, and now we had to translate it into our own language. And I started translating it, and I thought, no one is going to understand this. This is like, thinking of the German audience, I was thinking, they'll probably just switch off their computers when they read this. I mean, mothers and brothers, like, is this like some kind of story about a family? What is this? I mean, I was like, wow, I couldn't get it. And so I turned to the commentaries, and it was so clear. The commentary Rinpoche is using, Geshema Wangmo's commentary, so clear, so beautiful. And then another commentary, Rinpoche yesterday mentioned him, but I said Tenda. No, it's Temba Rapgye. I couldn't think of the name in that moment, so it's actually Temba Rapgye. It's a longer commentary. So a little bit more tantric kind of explanation, especially in the beginning. It talks more of a tantric way of looking at the text. But anyway, I thought, if I want people to benefit from this amazing text in German, I need to put something together for them to read. And so the idea came up, and it was so easy with these incredible commentaries available in Tibetan to put something together. And once I had done that, once I put something into English, into German, it was easy to translate into English. That doesn't take a long time. And that's how it came to be, that I thought, it's so rich. It's such a beautiful text. It's so inspiring, but people don't know about it because there's no commentary available. And once I'd done this, then I found Jeffrey Hopkins had already done it. So anyway, that's how this came to be. And it helped me personally as well, because I easily forget. And so to just, be able to read through it again and understand a little bit more what mother and so forth means. But of course, Rinpoche gave such rich explanation, which hopefully is not in contradiction with what I put there together. But the point is, so as he explained, therefore, in the first verse, what does it tell us? In short, it talks about how Changkya Rölpai Dorjé, basically why he taught this, that this was due to his understanding. So what we need to understand is that emptiness has been with us at all times, and our own mind has the capacity to understand that, but hasn't done so. And well, hopefully one day, unexpectedly, we'll be able to realize emptiness. Okay? But of course, it's not that simple. And realizing emptiness is done step by step. Oh gosh. Did I already speak for an hour? Yes, I did. Okay. Anyway, realizing emptiness is done slowly. It's not something we come to understand right away. And what do we need initially? We need reasons that establish for us that emptiness is possible. So, different reasons, and Rinpoche mentioned them very quickly. There are usually five types of reasons. Rinpoche also mentioned them in the week before. And some of those you're familiar with, and some of those they're less known. But just because Rinpoche mentioned them twice, I just want to at least say what they are. One is the reasoning. So reasoning really means the following: to establish that phenomena don't exist inherently. We need certain facts that we can actually easily be aware of that point at the fact that phenomena don't exist the way they appear, don't exist inherently. So one way is, for instance, look at the self. If the I existed inherently, then it would have to be either one with mind and body or totally separate. So that is the reasoning of being inherently one, or the reasoning of being one or inherently different. Inherently one or inherently different, you can add that. So can I add the word inherently? But it's just saying if the I existed independently, it wouldn't depend on the aggregates. So it could either be totally separate from the aggregates, like it wouldn't depend, it would be inherently existent. So if hypothetically it existed inherently, that would mean it would be totally independent of the aggregates, totally separate, or it would be one with the aggregates because it couldn't depend on them. But if it's one with them, well, you can't have something that depends on itself. That doesn't make sense. It's not like the dependent depends on itself. It just is itself. So it can only be just one with the aggregates. Either it's totally the same or it's totally separate. But if you look at it, it's impossible. So the reasoning is saying that's impossible. So what does the first reasoning tell us? The I doesn't exist inherently because it's neither inherently one nor inherently different, as in like one with its parts or inherently different from its parts. That's the first reasoning. And then the next three reasonings, they just deal with how does something like the I come into existence? Because if it exists, there has to be a cause that gives rise to it. So the I now, for instance, what gave rise to the I now, my I now, me as a person right now? What causes gave rise to it? And how did these causes give rise to me right now? Am I already existent in the cause? Have I risen from myself in the sense of like something identical with myself, or something that's the same nature? Or is it something totally separate? Or is it both, or is it neither? So that's the diamond splitter reasoning. And again, saying those are all extremes. Those are all extremes. I've arisen from a cause, yes, but I was not present at the time of this cause. I was not in the cause. It was not like I was inseparable from that cause, to say it briefly. And it's not that the cause was totally inherently separate from me, and so forth. Okay, so again, just denying that there's a certain way in which the I has arisen, as an example, the I has arisen, but it can't exist inherently because none of those extremes are given. Because if the I existed inherently, then one of those four extremes would have to be the case. But again, that's not true. And anyway, for the next reasoning is the same, saying the I can't exist inherently because neither was it existent at the time of its cause, nor was it inherently non-existent at the time of its cause. Inherently is important here. It wasn't inherently non-existent. That's the third type of reasoning. It's really difficult to put it into words. It's like the reasoning that refutes arising from existence and non-existence. Doesn't tell you much, but the words themselves are a little bit misleading. But the point is that that's the reasoning, saying what I just said. Okay, it's just a quick introductions to those reasonings. And the fourth type of reasoning is saying, and the I has arisen, but not just from one cause, but from many causes. And it's not a single cause, because it's not just a single result, because in other words, well, it's really just saying there's not a single cause, one single cause that gives rise to just a single result. That is impossible. And you can't have many causes giving rise to just one result. And you can't have one cause giving rise to many results. So the only possibility is that you have many causes giving rise to many results, but that doesn't take place inherently. Okay, so there's no arising from many causes. You can't have inherently many results. Okay, so in that way, again, looking at cause and effect and how things arise and refuting that arisal. So these are all sorts of different reasons, four reasons in a simple way, laid out in a simple way. But of course, you spend a lot of time thinking about them. What does that mean? In order to understand, therefore, the I, as an example, can't exist the way it appears to me. It just doesn't make sense, right? For all these reasons. So all of those reasons actually deny extreme forms of arisal or extreme ideas being inherently one with its parts or inherently different from its parts, and so forth. The fifth reason is the reason of dependent arising. And that reason does not negate anything. It talks about an affirming fact, saying phenomena exist interdependently. And that is the brother here. That is the king of reasoning. And it's also a brother, someone who's close to us, as in like, well, realizing emptiness, like the mother, because without realizing emptiness directly, we won't eliminate self-grasping. So just an understanding of interdependence is not sufficient. It's emptiness itself we have to realize directly, right? But still, it's like a brother to us. And dependent arising is the reasoning that points us in the right direction. And so that is the means by which we come to understand. So in verse 3, it's saying that it is, where's the brother? Oh yeah, there's, yeah. So quietly spoken by brother, dependent arising. So what the verse is saying is that before we came to understand anything about emptiness or dependent arising, there was a sense, this is this and this is this. Very clearly, we had a sense everything is inherently this and that and so forth. Once we hear about emptiness, once we hear about dependent arising, Nothing is the way it was before. No eye, no ear, no nose, as it says in the Heart Sutra. It's not this, it's not that. So everything we took for granted previously was so clearly laid out. This is this world, it's like this, like that. It isn't like this, like that. Not independently, not inherently. So she's perhaps, basically based on that understanding of previously, it's this, we come to, it is not this, it's not that, and so forth. Right, let me just look at my commentary here as well to make sure I say it correctly. So therefore, just a sec. Verse 3. Oh yes, so what it means we come to think that on account of the cognition, we have understood that phenomena, because of emptiness, we understand that which was previously this, that, and the other, maybe it's not this, that, and the other, and perhaps it's, well, the opposite of not inherently existent, and so forth. All right. So in that sense, she perhaps gives rise to no longer being this, that, and the other, but rather being not inherently that, not inherently something else, and so forth, which is initially quietly spoken by my brother, dependent arising. So initially you apply this reasoning, and really in Tibetan, it doesn't literally say quietly spoken, but in a hidden manner. In a hidden manner, really, it says. But it sounds so weird in English, so I guess the translator has chosen this expression because here in a hidden manner just means you need a generic image. You can't directly realize emptiness in dependence on that reasoning. Initially, you just infer. You generate what's called an inferential cognition. So it's through having a generic image and a generic like a representation of what emptiness means. Through that appearance, you have a coarse kind of understanding of emptiness, if you like. So this is what number 3 talks about, before you deepen that understanding to then realize emptiness directly. And then it goes on to say, so this being basically, he's with verse 2, therefore he says, well, I'm about to realize. And how did I get there? And that's the first 2 lines from verse 3. Well, independence on dependent arising. Dependent arising got me there, gets me there, because I come to understand, although just conceptually, that what I previously assumed to be this, that, and the other, it just isn't that way at all. And then the extensive explanation starts with verse 3, lines 3 and 4. Now it's saying that everything exists because of emptiness. This is form is empty, emptiness is form, like in the Heart Sutra. Emptiness is form is really saying, well, everything is possible because phenomena lack inherent existence. Because they don't exist inherently, they can actually exist. So here it's saying this diverse subject-object world means the mind and its object. In other words, everything that exists, everything that appears, external objects, the mind, our inner world, all this is an expression of emptiness. It's only possible because of emptiness. It's my mother's gentle smile. Jeffrey Hopkins uses this word, it's a mask, but I don't think that's, well, it's a draft, so you may have still adjusted it. He said a smiling mask. I think, no, it's a gentle smile. It's this gentle smile of the mother. It's the smile of the mother. It's an expression. Everything is possible because phenomena don't exist inherently. If they existed inherently, you couldn't exist, I couldn't exist, there wouldn't be a mind, there wouldn't be anything, because things would be independent, would not depend on anything else, so they couldn't change independence on other things. They'd be rigid, couldn't interact, and it'd be absurd. It wouldn't be possible for anything to exist. Okay, so therefore the diverse subject-object world is my mother's gentle smile. Because things don't exist inherently, they exist. And this cycle of birth and death, even the negative aspects, well, they are her deceptive words in the sense that, well, they are possible because there is emptiness, because phenomena don't exist inherently. So even the negative aspects of this world, they're just an expression of emptiness. It's because phenomena lack inherent existence, if you have certain causes, such as a misapprehension of reality of this mother, well, it leads to birth and aging and so forth, and we're deceived by it. So deceptive words doesn't mean that mother deceives us, but we ourselves are deceived by it because of our misapprehension. So we believe phenomena to exist inherently. And okay, so I just finished verse 4. That's the last verse. So in a way, I'm going through whatever Rinpoche said again, but just to not in the same way, and of course to make sure the verses become clearer. And in the end it says, well, my undeceiving mother, previously it says it was deceptive, now it's my undeceiving mother again, but in a sense that because emptiness is undeceiving in the sense that emptiness itself is not deceptive, in that when it appears to the mind, it appears in the way it exists. Okay, so in that sense, we can say all these other phenomena, it's just the nature, it's just how our mind works. Any phenomenon other than emptiness, when we directly perceive it, whether we perceive it conceptually or directly, in both ways, because of our basic misapprehension of reality, they all appear as if inherently existent. Until we become a Buddha, that appearance will remain. However, emptiness is different. When we realize emptiness directly, that appearance doesn't arise. So therefore, the mother is undeceiving because, well, when we perceive emptiness directly, there's no mistaken appearance. But still, our mother has betrayed me because I was led astray by karma and afflictive emotions. So it was that, how is it possible? Why do I have karma and afflictive emotions? Well, again, it's an expression of emptiness in the sense that, well, if emptiness didn't exist, if phenomena didn't lack inherent existence, you wouldn't have karma and afflictions, you wouldn't have anything. And so therefore, in a way, even the negative aspects, of course, are the undesirable aspects are an expression of emptiness because, well, they still lack inherent existence. Nothing exists inherently. So therefore, you've betrayed me, or I've been betrayed by this. Of course, not in the sense emptiness has done anything wrong. So it's more like saying I've been betrayed by this, following after my karma and afflictions and believing them to be truly existent. But of course, I hope to be saved by my brother. So I hope to be saved by my brother dependent rising, who shows me my mother, and it's ultimately in your kindness. So it's really ultimately in dependence on my brother, I can find my mother, and in that lies my freedom. Okay. So that was a brief summary of what we came to before. Hopefully, if you read it again, it becomes clearer. Maybe read those explanatory notes, which are strictly based on the commentaries, making that clearer. And again, of course, as a preparation for what Rinpoche is going to teach next week. Again, Rinpoche said he will teach more about emptiness, of course, selflessness, and some of those ideas will become clearer. Okay, so that should be enough. We've got about 20 minutes left. Am I right, Kumbin?
Yes, Geshe.
All right. So, any questions? If you have any questions on what I said or not anything else? Yes, Schützel? I read Schützel.
Schützel, please unmute.
Yes. Good morning. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Sure.
I have a question about what you just said, because it was one of my questions yesterday and you answered it actually. About initially it's inferential cognition, you said, when we have first, if I understood well, we have first inferential cognition, so we understand intellectual
Conceptual.
Yeah, through meaning generality, we understand emptiness. So what is happening from this time when it's still inferential to have a direct realization emptiness? What is
what happens in between? Yes.
In between, when it becomes direct.
Good, very good. Yes, that's a good question. What happens in between, Venerable Schützel? So yes, well, as I said before, so it's like you have just a representation of what emptiness is. It's a bit like, just to clarify this again, what I mean, if you, for instance, I usually give this example, if you look at let's say in the space in front of you, in the room in front of you, have a cupboard. If you look at this cupboard, okay, you directly perceive with your eye consciousness the cupboard. That is a direct perception with an eye consciousness. If then I ask you to close your eyes and to think of this cupboard, right? So there's no longer an eye consciousness. That which thinks of the cupboard is now the mental consciousness, and the cupboard still appears. There's an appearance of the cupboard. That is called the generic image. Your mind, our mind, doesn't work without such an image. So just close your eyes and it appears to your mind. But that appearance of this cupboard is just a representation of the actual cupboard, because it's not like clearly appearing as a real cupboard. So when we first realize emptiness, there's the same process. Of course, you can't look at emptiness with your sense consciousnesses. So you don't have that first input that you have, as in the case of this cupboard. You first see it directly, and then through memory, it appears. Here, this generic image does not arise from memory, but through reasoning. So the mind first comes to this kind of representation of what emptiness is. It appears to the mind, and in that way you understand what emptiness is. That's amazing, having that. But still, what's in the way is that appearance of this general image of emptiness, and you want it to go away, for it to be a direct experience where your mind directly tastes, directly experiences emptiness. And the question being, how do you get rid of it? Well, different to the scenario, well, I close my eyes, I have a appearance of the cupboard, and I just need to open my eyes to again perceive it directly. That doesn't work, because emptiness, of course, can't be perceived with the sense consciousnesses, but it's through familiarity. To meditate on emptiness again and again and again. In that way, emptiness itself becomes clearer and clearer. And this generic image, that representation of what emptiness is, right? That it's like the representation of the table that appears when you think of the table. Well, in the case of emptiness, it grows weaker and weaker and weaker, and it slowly disappears. The appearance of that representation of what emptiness is disappears, and emptiness itself appears clearly to the mind. That is the nature of the mind. The mind can actually do that. And the question would be, can I do that with a cupboard? Could I just, without ever looking at the cupboard again, meditate on the cupboard, meditate? May one day the cupboard appear clearly to me? Yes. If I have the right amount of concentration, you need calm abiding in combination with special insight into, in the case of emptiness. So with that kind of mind, if I took the cupboard as my object, I could actually have a conceptual understanding of the cupboard, and then through meditation directly perceive the cupboard with my mental consciousness. Such is the capacity of the mind. But why would I bother about a cupboard? Who cares? I can just open my eyes and look at it. Emptiness, of course, is important to be understood. Does that make sense? Okay, great. All right. Then, Anil?
Sorry, Geshe.
Tashidale.
Tashidale.
Nice to actually listen to you giving such a good interpretation of dependent arising. My question, Geshe, is now when we talk about the fifth bardo, which is known as the luminosity of true nature. So is the fifth bardo and depending arising the same thing?
Fifth bardo.
Yeah.
What do you mean with fifth bardo?
I mean, what I have read, like that, the fifth bardo is like, a true nature, a luminosity. When you attain the true nature, you attain the fifth bardo. Okay. So is dependent arising and fifth bardo the same thing that we're talking about?
I'm not exactly sure this expression, this term, fifth bardo. I'm not, okay, never mind. But what I believe, I'm not familiar with this, but what I believe you mean is, well, just the luminous nature of the mind, the clear nature of the mind, right? That's what you're referring to.
Yes.
Actual, yeah. So, well, especially in the tantric system, and one commentary, I remember I talked about this commentary that's more extensive. It's by Denpa Rabgye, teaching Denpa Rabgye, it's actually talking from the tantric point of view. It's saying, like, instead of saying the emptiness itself or the emptiness of my mind, it talks about the clear light mind, the emptiness of the clear light mind, the subtlest mind. So in that way, there is already that interpretation, if you like. So the clear light, the actual nature of our mind that is free from all afflictions and so forth. Well, is that dependent arising? Is that the same? No, I mean, it's not the same. Actually, when we talk about, and Rinpoche mentioned this yesterday, he spoke about, in answer to the question, why do we forget? And is there a way we do remember from life to life? And anyway, so in that context, Rinpoche talked about utilizing the clear light mind, that very subtle mind. If that was always there, was always present, we would remember from life to life, because our memory exists on a coarser level, and then when we die, that memory just disappears. It's only the imprints which are left. So this is what Rinpoche also talked about. So it's this very subtle mind that we all have that is active at certain times while we're dying and so forth. Now that is pure. It's a pure mind. It's in the nature of, well, purity. There's no affliction with regard to that mind. But right now, it can't manifest in our continuum. It lacks inherent existence, of course, as everything that exists. But besides that, on a conventional level, it's totally pure. It's the same. In its nature is the mind of a Buddha, if you like. So we have that mind already, but we can't make it appear at will. And even if we were able to make it, to actualize it at will, we can't keep it. So that's because of the afflictive emotions. That's the misapprehension of reality, which is in control. It's in control. Our misapprehension of reality controls every aspect of our life, even if it lies dormant. It's ever present. That's why we don't really attain lasting happiness. And so self-grasping, that being the reason for that pure nature not to be able to surface, well, that self-grasping, it just apprehends the opposite of what is there. What does it apprehend? The I to be inherently existent, other phenomena to be inherently existent. So phenomena don't exist that way. That's the actual nature of phenomena. They don't exist that way. And what? That everything is dependently arisen, that everything exists in dependence, right? It can't exist in and of itself independently if it depends on other things. So it's really just the concept of dependent arising that exists within everything. A table, a car, everything depends on other things. It's the nature of phenomena. But that is more obvious to us than the lack of inherent existence. So we use that to infer from the fact that the I depends on so many aspects, as an example, that the I doesn't exist inherently. And with that understanding, we can get rid of the self-grasping. And finally, we have nothing in the way for that very subtle mind to manifest. For the mind that once it manifests at all times, we can keep it, and it never grows latent, it never grows dormant. That's when we have the mind of a Buddha. Anil, does that explain that a little bit?
Thank you, Geshela. And Geshela, if we remove the I, so do we attain the bodhicitta?
We don't remove the I, because there is a conventional I. We don't remove, there's still an I, but we remove the self-grasping.
The ego.
Yes, exactly. The ego as in like the self-grasping mind. But you don't necessarily have bodhicitta right away. It's much easier. You can generate bodhicitta before removing the self-grasping mind. That is possible. So you train yourself in bodhicitta, and despite the self-grasping mind, you can generate bodhicitta, but it's limited, right? So eventually, to move on, to strengthen your bodhicitta, you have to get rid of self-grasping to gain a certain degree of bodhicitta, but that's really highly advanced bodhicitta. But the point is that even if you don't achieve or don't develop bodhicitta before you eliminate the self-grasping mind, if you eliminate the self-grasping mind first, that doesn't mean you have automatically bodhicitta, because the self-grasping mind, when it's gone, the tendency to be to put yourself first is still there. The tendency of the self-grasping mind and the self-centeredness in particular, the tendencies are there. So you have no self-centeredness any longer, but there's still the habit, the tendency left, which is a bit of an obstacle to the mind that dedicates itself to all others. So you still have to make an effort. It grows easily, definitely easily within a few hours, possibly. You have bodhicitta, but it still requires some effort.
So, Geshe, sorry, one last thing. During this COVID pandemic, you would have heard about this gentleman in the United Kingdom and one in India. They gave their bed away to a much younger person. They said, "We have lived our life." The respirator and things like that. So, do you think that by doing so, they had attained bodhicitta?
Not
No,
necessarily.
not necessarily.
Because just giving it to one person doesn't mean I want to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. It's the motivation for the welfare of all sentient beings. From now on, all I do is work towards enlightenment. So maybe that was his motivation, but maybe he just wanted to benefit this one person, which is amazing, of course, what he did, sacrificing his life. But it's still important to understand it is aiming towards enlightenment for the welfare of all sentient beings. That is bodhicitta.
Right.
So it's
Geshe,
just
thank you so
redefined.
much.
Sure, you're welcome. All right, please,
Thank you.
next question. Yes.
B, could you unmute
Oh, B,
yourself?
is it B first? Okay.
Hi, Geshema. Yes, yeah.
Hi, B.
I think, well, I don't want to sound too arrogant saying this. I think I have a certain intellectual understanding of what emptiness is, but I have problem understanding what is left after we negate the inherent existence. So, for example, Prasangika, they have this catchphrase that say all phenomena are established conventionally by mere imputation by the conceptual mind.
Yes.
So I started thinking that, for example, a table, an imputed table. The imputation is 100% from the mind, and the basis is the parts of the table. So in between that, what is the imputation? What is the imputed table? Is that matter, or is that non-associated compositional factor? I mean, and where exactly is that imputed table located? I don't know whether it's appropriate for me to think about all these questions, but they just come to mind.
No, very good, very good. You're on the right way. You're moving in the right direction. It's of course always that difficulty when you deny something, when you deny inherent existence. Well, what is left? You want to posit something, and often we end up still positing too much. Okay, sometimes we deny too much, we refute too much, so we end up with nothing being there. And sometimes we want to posit something. So your question being, okay, it makes sense, yes. Yeah, it makes sense. If you look for the table, if you look for something among its parts, right? Something solid, some tableness, can't find it. Okay, like this non-fungibility, but that's only the first step. From there you go, okay, so I can't find the table among its parts. So I just label table, I just call it a table. But now your question is, what is it that I'm calling? What is that thing? So to me, that sounds like, what is that thing that is still there? So it's almost like you're trying to label an inherent thing, like an inherent thing that is not the parts, but it's still a table. It's still that something inherent there. And that's the thing, even that needs to go in that. And that's the difficulty, really. The difficulty here is if you have, well, let's take a table, and next to the table, you have a pillow, okay? A table, and next to it, a pillow. Now, in both cases, we say the pillow is not a table, it's not inherently a table, and the table itself is not inherently a table. But the difference is that in terms of convention, when I look at this table, based on certain parts that a table happens to have, and then those parts being assembled in a certain way, our mind labels table. Okay. If I didn't label table, there wouldn't be a table. There would be parts, but there wouldn't be table. There wouldn't be the parts of a table. So my mind labels table on the basis of these parts. Okay, but you are still looking for something that the label is applied to, right? You're still looking for something that the label is applied to. What is it applied to? To a mere conventional table, to a table, right? In that, we're not saying the table is a label. Sometimes people say, well, when they hear phenomena are merely labeled, and in the Tibetan, they sometimes say it's mere name. That doesn't mean the table is a name, but the table only exists because on the basis of these parts, I applied the label table. Therefore, there's a table. If I didn't apply that label, there wouldn't be a table. So I'm just on the basis of these parts, there is, well, the label, really one part that's really important, and you probably know that from your question. It sounds like you studied Buddhist philosophy. So just for everyone else who hasn't heard that, what was I going to say? Sorry, just a second, I need to think. From the point of view of Buddhist philosophy, oh yes, when we say labeling, it doesn't literally always mean applying the word, saying from now on, I will call this a table. No, labeling takes part on the basis of the thought consciousness. So our mind, even if you don't know language, even if you didn't know words and language and so forth, there's always a conceptual consciousness. There's always thought. And you can think without using language. You can use imagery, for instance. If you don't know the word of something, you can still think about it through the appearance of that image, the generic image. If you don't know the word for ocean, you may just have almost like a photograph, like an internal photograph of the ocean, and through that you can think of the ocean. That mind is a labeling mind. So having the thought ocean, but of course I need to use a word now to talk about it, but just the thought table, whichever way, whether you use it using the word, applying the term, like internally with your thought consciousness, or any other imagery that helps you to get at that thought is a label. So it's really just the thought table based on those parts. So what are you applying those words to? Well, to a conventional table, to a merely imputed table. That your mind just had that thought table. Okay, so it applied that label, whatever your mind uses in that moment, using the word, for instance, applying that to that merely conjured up conventional table. Does that make sense, Alicia? Was that no? B.
Yes,
B.
yes. So may I? Okay. So maybe another way of putting this is that, so if the table is in front of me and I touch the table with my hand,
yes,
what is it that I'm touching? Am I touching the imputed table? Am I touching the basis of the imputed table?
Okay, good question. What are you touching? Are you touching the table? Well, let me ask you, what are you, on the basis of what are you labeling table? Are you labeling table on the basis of all its parts?
Of the whole, I mean,
Okay,
conventionally, without analysis, I know that it is a table. But when I start doing analysis, then I start asking myself the questions. Or I touch the phone. So am I touching the quote unquote the merely imputed phone? Or am I touching the basis of the imputation of that imputed phone?
Can it not be both?
Oh, yeah. I don't know, I'm asking.
Because look, this phone, right? So if say you touch this phone, if I touch this phone, am I touching the merely labeled phone, and am I touching the basis of the phone? Well, as I said, when you label, think of all the parts of the table. You take all the parts of the table, and based on that, of course, assembled in a certain way, providing a certain, or well, having a certain function, therefore, based on that, I label table. So I label table on all the parts. And if you touch one part, you're touching the table, right? Let me give you another example. When we say the I, we label the I on the basis of mind and body, all the parts, which is why when my legs walk, I label I walk. When my legs walk, okay, I say I walk. So when I touch my legs, I say I touch myself, right? If you touch my legs, I say you touch. So what are you touching? My basis of imputation, but you're also touching me, because I label I on all these parts. So whenever one of those parts does something, I say the I does so. And it seems that there's a separate I, right? You touch my eye, and then there's this little I inside that you also touch. Kind of through touching my skin, you're also touching that I. That's how it feels, as if there was a separate I. Especially if you poke me strongly, like you go like that, and I go, they poke me, right? It's not like there's this strong this strong feeling here. No, it seems like some I is also poked, okay? And the same way, if it's your table, let's say it's this really precious, expensive table, and someone took like a nail and poked, pierced into your table. It's like, not only have they destroyed the surface, they destroyed the table. It seems as if there was a separate table, but no, there's of the part that has been touched. So you have the conventional table that is being pierced by the nail. And so both happens in that moment. You've pierced the basis of imputation and the conventional, right? Just as if you pierce my arm, you've pierced the basis of imputation of the I, and therefore you pierce the I, because whatever happens to the basis happens to the I, because the I is merely labeled on the basis. B, does that make sense? Oh, there's B.
Okay, yes. Okay, so
maybe think about it once more, because there's still one question.
Yes. Thank you.
Right?
Thank you so much.
Yes,
okay.
Sure, of course. Yes, hi.
Yesterday, I've asked the questions, and my first question was saying that based on the Prasangika view, external objects are projection of our minds. And so is that logical to say that the external object appears exactly in accordance to our state of mind? Being the fact that we understand that our minds are empty of objective existence, and so are our the imputed objects that we impute. So when I was saying that whatever I re-impute, the objects, external objects, of course not findable, but is it exactly the same as in accordance to our mind, meaning our state of mind? And then I didn't get Rinpoche explain that it's a little bit more than just something, which I think I couldn't get very well. I just wondered if you could revisit and explain that a little.
Okay, all right. Well, I remember you asked whether the projections of the mind does it depend on the state of mind we're in? And then Rinpoche talked about, well, objects being merely labeled by the mind, right? Rinpoche talked about the fact that, well, this table, that you seeing this table is only possible because of having labeled a table, okay? Yeah. So, but I think what I thought you were asking was also about the state of mind. What came to mind when I heard your question was a bit like, well, depending on how I feel, or depending what cultural background I have, like, what does labeling mean? I mean, it's individually, we're saying in general, we all label, but my sense of a table is quite different from a sense of a table of a person who never uses a table, for instance, right? They may be taught this is a table, this is how it's used, Or there's more to it. When I label table, I together with that, is that a beautiful table? Is that an ugly table? And again, that is dependent on what I like and dislike, dependent on the culture I grew up in and so forth, maybe the influence of my parents. So now the way I look at it is that reality, okay? When we say reality, there's my reality, there's your reality, and there's everyone else's reality. So the summary of that we call reality.
Yes.
There is no fourth or fifth reality. That is no one's reality, but just reality, because that would be an objective reality, which is denied in Buddhism.
Sure.
So therefore, there's my reality and there's yours. Well, obviously, my reality is different from yours. The way I perceive things, there's similarity. As human beings, for instance, if we see a certain substance, we may both call it water, use it like water, experience it like water, but there can still be differences that you may really like water and I may hate it. I hate the sound of water, you love it, or whatever. There's still individual differences because of your background, because of your karmic imprints, because of so many other factors. So it does depend on the state of mind, my state of, or if I'm grumpy, that day I see water and I get really upset with water. In that moment, I don't like it. There's an unpleasant experience, whereas you're in a good mood and there's a positive experience. So therefore, in each moment, the thought water, you label in each moment. We label it. Every time there's a thought, water, car, house, friend, enemy. In that moment, we label, and of course, these label changes because the friend becomes the enemy and vice versa. But it's all individually dependent on our own mind.
Yeah,
right?
I think, sorry.
No.
I was just trying to illustrate that the external objects that we project in accordance to our minds, in fact, say for a very extreme example, for a ghost, they will see things which a ghost would see. Human will see what human, the objects that human would all see, would see, and so on. That kind of state of mind, precisely, exactly, in accordance to that. I think I just missed something that he said is something more about it, something more than that. I think it's maybe
something more.
Yeah.
What do you mean with more? More than what?
More than just according to our karma, karma. Yeah.
Something from the side of the object. There must be something.
The
world.
It would not be
over there.
It would not be on the object. The object is empty, but it's whatever we perceive. The things that we perceive, rather than apart from our karma, is something more, like some more conditions and so on, to making my projection, the projection that I perceive.
I think so. It's not just karma. Of course, there is if you say like a ghostly kind of a spirit, like a preta being who perceives water in a different way that we would perceive it, or an animal, there's that. But in each moment, I don't think it's all karma in that moment. It's like how I feel in a certain moment. Okay, that may be a karmic result, but just independent. I mean, of course, we can't really separate it from karma, but there's so many causes and conditions. Like if I just talked to you a moment earlier, I may see things slightly differently. So you affect me, right? You become a cause. You say something to me, let's say about water, and I have a slightly different way of looking at it, right? A moment later, and so forth. So dependent arising, meaning that, yes, my reality is determined by my mind, right? But still, all these other people around me, influencing me, affecting me, right? I don't live in a bubble. And of course, my karma, okay? So all these causes and conditions coming together for me to have this subjective experience of reality. And it seems to me it's objective over there. That's what makes me think, you've got a weird taste. You don't like that curtain? What's wrong with you? Of course, it's totally subjective.
Yeah.
Right?
why it says karma and conditions.
Karma and other causes and conditions.
Yeah,
Yes.
and karma and causes. So not just karma, but
not just karma. Not just karma. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Thank
you're
you.
welcome. All right, that seems to be the last question, and I don't know whether I should get back to B one last time. B, is it clearer? Did you reformulate your question? I know time is up, but if you want to get back one more time, I mean, you said.
Let me think about this. There's multi parts to my question. Let me think about it. Okay, thank you so much.
Sounds good. All right. Okay. Well, thank you very much. That's it. Time is up. So thank you for well, your questions, of course, for your interest. And let's make sure we dedicate whatever positive potential, whatever virtue we've accumulated. So without reciting a prayer, to just have the thought, may this contribute, may this become a cause for well, very importantly, for all our great masters like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Yangten Rinpoche and so forth, the great masters, to have a long life and share their wisdom with us for a long time to come. But may also, of course, very important, become a cause for us so that we're able to remove what's extra in our mind, the self-grasping and its tendencies, so that we one time are able to actualize our innermost nature, the subtlest mind of a Buddha. Not for our own welfare, not just for our own welfare, but for the welfare of all sentient beings. Okay. Thank you so much, and have a great day. Whatever is left on your side, wherever you are. Okay. Great night, a great day. Okay.
Thank you so much, Geshe. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Have a good
Take care.
afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Geshe. Bye-bye. Thank you, everybody. Good evening in India and good day wherever you are. And next weekend, we have Yangten Rinpoche again at 4 o'clock. Please join us. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a good Sunday. Bye-bye.
Can we also tell them about the course that starts tomorrow?
Sure. Tomorrow we have a course starting.